This is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the second trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder. Lots of Easter eggs in this one connecting to the comics, Infinity War, Thanos, and a super obscure Guardians of the Galaxy Easter egg, so let's dive right in. The trailer begins with a shot of the meditation tree that we saw in the previous trailer. Now this is very much like a spirit tree. This is similar to where Aboriginals would meditate in the Australian desert. Now these trees often have wind chimes tied to their branches as a way to harmonize the spirit and ward off evil. Circe actually communes with Arishem under one of these in the Eternals. Taika Waititi's Korg narrates to the blue people that we saw Thor saving in the last trailer. Shout out to Heavy Spoilers for catching that this planet is likely Indigar. In the comics, this was a world of atheists with no gods, but after a kid prays to Thor, he shows up to bring them rain. But then Thor goes off into space and discovers the world's gods were all killed by Gorr the God Butcher. More on him in a second. Now this scene seems like it could be bookend narration for the movie, kind of like in Battle for Planet of the Apes. Or this could just be a random shot of Korg and Taika Waititi recorded this narration just for the trailer. You can't trust these trailers, kids. They lie to us. And it's also appropriate that Taika Waititi's Korg is telling us this story because, as the director, he is literally the person telling us this story. On Twitter, Kevin Marr of Atomic Ape Productions pointed out that this is also like the opening of Taika Waititi's breakout hit, Boy.
Kia ora, my name is Boy, and welcome to my interesting world.
We can also see Thor's meditation tree in the background here. Now, Korg telling these kids the story of a god and building that myth would also feed into the theory that before Thor saved them, these people had no gods. Next, we see Thor in a costume modeled after the Thunderstrike suit from the comics, casting aside his robe. Now, we saw more of this scene in the previous trailer. The Guardians were overwhelmed defending the blue people from a force with lasers. Thor leaves the battle to meditate and then returns dressed as a member of Motley Crue. We can also see the Guardians of the Galaxy in this scene, with Groot and Rocket here in the back, Nebula here, Drax you can see in this overhead shot, and Star-Lord taking cover by a rock. And his new leather vest seems like it was cut from a Ravager's jacket, probably lifted from Star-Lord's wardrobe. And his shirt seems to depict Yggdrasil the World Tree, the map of the 9 realms that he drew for Jane in Thor.
Linked to each other by the branches of Yggdrasil, the world's tree.
And also, here inside the Benatar, we see Kraglin still wearing Yondu's fin, as he'll be a full-fledged member of the team in Guardians 3. Next, we see New Asgard, which now has a booming economy because it's a major tourist hub. Notice the Asgardian cruise line ships, the golf course, and see these golden-capped buildings. As Asgard becomes more prosperous, it starts to take on the look of the old city, maybe hinting that Asgardians haven't learned their lesson about imperialism and would eventually rebuild their society the way it was before Ragnarok. We also see Thor's chariot. Now, this chariot is lifted from mythology, and here it is pulled by 2 goats named Toothnasher and Toothgrinder, like in the comics. And as we saw in the last trailer, the chariot has a Cocktails and Dreams bar sign, my favorite Easter egg lifted from the movie Cocktail. This movie is going to be heavily based on the brilliant Gorr the God Butcher storyline from the Jason Aaron's stellar run on the comics, which I highly recommend you check out. Next, we see Thunderstrike Thor back on Sakaar with Korg. Now, the last time we saw Korg, he was chilling with Deadpool.
Any tips on getting into the MCU there, Korg?
But the last time we saw Korg actually in the MCU, he joined the battle against Thanos after gaming with Thor for a few years.
Beers in the bucket. Feel free to log into the Wi-Fi. No password, obviously.
Now, he still could have been on New Asgard, but I think it's more likely that after that battle, he returned to Sakaar to help run the planet after the revolution that he started.
The revolution has begun.
After Thor finds all the dead gods above Indigar, I could see him seeking out the help of Korg. Now, on Sakaar, we see him use Stormbreaker to transform from Thunderstrike Thor into an outfit that is much more like the one he wore in the Unworthy Thor run in the comics. Now, this was a period during that Jason Aaron run where Thor believed he was unworthy to wield Mjolnir, and Jane took up the mantle of Thor instead. Now, Stormbreaker changing Thor's clothes is not a new power. Remember, all the way back in the first Thor, when he became worthy once more, Odin's magic returned Thor's armor to him. Then, in Endgame, Thor just conjures up new clothes for himself to fight Thanos. So in this trailer, we see Thor having outfit changes within the same scene. This is because of Stormbreaker's ability to do this, to give him new clothes. But it's also a reflection of Thor's character arc. In this movie, he is seeking his place in the universe, trying to figure out where he belongs, so his wardrobe is constantly changing. Then we see the montage of Thor training that we saw in the last trailer. He has a trucker hat with the original Avengers logo featuring the names of the team members, where he's crossed out their names and written Strongest Avenger, a nod to this.
Strongest Avenger.
Access denied.
Strongest Avenger.
Access denied.
I love this shot of him training by towing the Benatar behind him. Next we see Thor fighting in New Asgard with his more traditional space Viking gear. In the last trailer, I thought maybe these creatures could be venom symbionts for reasons I'll get into later, but now it's clear these are giant insects.
Could Ant-Man have turned to the dark side and attacked the city?
Well, I doubt it. This is probably an ancient enemy of Asgard like the Royal Nexians. In the comics, this is a race of insectoids who often attacked Asgard. It would make sense if they attacked here because they perceive Asgard as being weaker because they don't have their giant city in space. Now, we do also see regular Asgardians fighting them as well as soldiers because every Asgardian is super strong, not just the royal family or the military. Love this scene.
Reclaimed his title as the one and only Thor.
Kenzie L on Twitter pointed out this is very much like the ending of The Force Awakens.
Reclaimed his title.
And we see that Jane Foster is the new mighty Thor. This was a fantastic story in the comics. While Thor believed that he was unworthy to lift the hammer, Mjolnir chose Jane Foster to wield it. In the comics, Mjolnir was actually imbued with a living, sentient space storm that could choose who was able to wield the hammer. And during this time, Jane was suffering from cancer and undergoing chemotherapy. Becoming Thor actually purged the chemo drugs from her body, so helping people was actually killing her. It's a great story. The theory I've had for a while is that Jane was visiting New Asgard, which was built near the site where the hammer fell and has become a tourist destination. And then the hammer reforged itself for her. Notice how it still shows the cracks in the metal, showing that it's been reformed and not reforged. Later in the trailer, we also see that it breaks apart and comes together like Jane is unleashing this sentient storm inside.
Jane?
So this next suit is a combination of a couple ones from the comics. It's loosely inspired by the King Thor suit from the Jason Aaron run, which showed Thor in a distant future where he ruled Asgard. But it seems also lifted directly from the brilliant Walt Simonson run in the 1980s. During this time, Thor was cursed with brittle bones, so he had to wear stronger armor in combat. Next, we get a shot of Valkyrie riding into the subterranean hall that we see later in the trailer. Notice this hole in the ceiling and these columns. Here, it seems like Thor is waiting to greet Valkyrie in City Hall. This is very much like the building where she was holding a meeting with the world governments in the last trailer. Then we see Jane in a very comic book accurate suit landing in the same location Valkyrie was just riding into. Behind her we see a statue of Uatu, the Watcher from What If. And this is the Living Tribunal. In the comics, he is the cosmic arbiter and judge over all of existence. We first heard him teased in Doctor Strange.
This is the staff of the Living Tribunal.
And then we actually spotted him here in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
What's it been like? 3-4 years?
8 years, 7 months and 6 days, give or take.
Now, this has a couple meanings. One, it actually has been about 8 years and 7 months since Thor: The Dark World was released. That was the last time these characters appeared on screen together. But also, if Jane blipped, then she would have perceived this time as just 3 years. Whereas for Thor, it's been 8 years. This would also explain another reason why Thor was so distraught over his failure to kill Thanos in Infinity War. Because his failure killed Jane. Next, we go to Mount Olympus. My guess is that after Thor realizes the gods are endangered, he reforms the Avengers to visit other gods and warn them about the danger to come.
Yeah, it's called the Revengers.
Revenges?
On this walkway, we can see Thor, Valkyrie, Korg, and Jane. Valkyrie was probably anxious to get out of ruling New Asgard, judging by how bored she was in the previous trailer. Also, if Gorr is going around killing gods, then she would want to go on the offensive to defend her kingdom before he can attack. Also, check out how her new armor also bears a crown to show her place in the new royal hierarchy. And notice this statue of Zeus, who we're going to meet in just a minute. Statues and murals were also present all throughout Thor Ragnarok. In that movie, Waititi was making a statement about how the rulers like Loki, Odin, and Grandmaster were extolling their virtues to oppress people. Basically, they were trying to make themselves appear as grandiose heroes so the people would follow them. And here we see that Zeus is doing the same thing. And this is exactly what Gorr the God Butcher is trying to destroy. So let's talk about Gorr the God Butcher. In the comics, Gorr was an alien who was a devout worshiper of his planet's gods. Long story short, his entire family died in a drought, including his pregnant wife. Then he swore to destroy all gods however he could. Then he got his hands on a sword called the All Black, which belonged to Null, the god of the symbiotes. That's why I thought that these attacking creatures could be symbiotes.
The only ones who gods care about is themselves.
But then we do see Gorr in what looks like the Null space from the comics. This is a realm of eternal blackness that Null rules over. We see him grip the all-black Necro sword on a planet where he was likely just killed himself some gods. I am wondering, given the cliffs and the shoreline, if this could be New Asgard. Vic Digital on Twitter points out that when Gorr is around, he drains all the color from the world. I'm guessing that's not just a cinematography choice, but a byproduct of Gorr's presence. It's a very cool observation. Now, Gorr is on a killing spree throughout the cosmos, killing every god he can find.
All gods will die.
This blackness that engulfs him is also from the comics. It's the entropy that he uses to trap and attempt to kill King Thor. You recognize this shot from the last trailer. We see Thor and Korg overlooking what you might think is a monster, but it's actually a god called Falagar the Behemoth. This panel is taken straight from the comics. Falagar was one of Thor's friends, and you can really see the hurt on his face here. When he saddles up his goats in New Asgard, we see that his ship is called the Aegir. And remember, Stormbreaker creates a Bifrost, which is how the ship is able to travel on a rainbow road.
I just want to say that was very, very impressive what you did back there.
Thor awkwardly trying out his moves on Jane is great. Now I think here he's talking about the Battle of New Asgard because she immediately says,
It's just my first bad guy.
which makes me think that Jane got her powers during the ant creature attack. Next we see Thor, Jane, and Valkyrie fighting off the soldiers of Zeus. Notice how they even wear period-accurate Greek military uniforms, and the shields are even like the ones we saw depicted in the comic book and movie 300. Then we see Gorr using the sword to strike and eradicate a small moon. Very similar to how the Power Stone worked in Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe the all-black sword, being part of the god of nothingness, can also work as a kind of Genesis machine that can purge a planet of all life. I also thought it was cool how Gorr's eyes glow orange, even when the world around him is desaturated. Almost like the power of Null, or whatever force drives him, is pulsating from his soul. And the orange color also reminded me of Heimdall's eyes. And remember, Heimdall had the ability to see souls.
From here, I could see 9 realms and 10 trillion souls.
Now, it could be possible that Gorr was able to steal some of the same power, to give him the ability to see any god across the multiverse. So, we might even see the origin of Heimdall's powers in this movie. Then we get a few fun shorts, Zeus appearing before his people, Thor confronting Gorr with the saturation being drained out of him, and Valkyrie fighting Gorr with one of Zeus's lightning bolts. Maybe because Gorr showed up in Olympus and killed the thunder god. I think that this shot where the chariot breaks into the arena is Thor summoning his goats to save them all. Then we see Thor as a captive in a tunic fighting off Zeus's soldiers.
I'm not like the other gods of kill.
Now, Gorr's line here is also lifted straight from the comics. Nebula and Drax on planet Indigar, and then Thor's reply.
Because I have something worth fighting for.
As he holds hands with Jane and Gorr's desolated plane. It seems like their love and connection will be the key to overcoming Gorr, because Gorr's whole deal is that he is alone and he curses the gods for his loneliness. Then we see Jane back in the hall from earlier. These other statues are likely Lady Death, Infinity, and this one could be Eon. Eon, side note, is a cosmic entity that bestows the quantum bands on heroes, which might be the source of Ms. Marvel's powers in the new show. Now, some of these figures also appeared in the Morag Temple in Guardians of the Galaxy. This mural depicted the cosmic beings death, entropy, infinity, and eternity all surrounding the Infinity Stones. I'm also wondering if this could be located in Omnipotent City. In the Gorr the God Butcher storyline, this is basically a space hub for all the gods. It's where Thor goes to figure out what's happening to all of his fellow gods. Then we get to the button scene where we finally see Russell Crowe's Zeus holding Thor captive, while Jane, Thor, and Valkyrie are in disguise. Kenzie L on Twitter points out that everyone is so distracted by Thor's butt that they didn't see his Loki back tattoo, which might have been a tribute to his dead brother, or a prank that his dead brother pulled on him. But my guess is it's a tribute, because when we see him shirtless in Thor, no back tattoo. Well, that's all the Easter eggs that I found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter, and if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.